Welcome back to Aggie Fly Talk. My name is Joseph Lopez, the president of the club. I'm here with Brian, a member of the club, and with a few guests today. A little bit different setting than our usual podcast room, but joining me I have Matt and Jeremy. Matt, you want to kind of go over introduction of yourself and what you do with Indifly, and then we'll move on to Jeremy.
Sure. Happy to do it. First of all, thanks for having us, guys. Excited about this one. So I'll go a little bit about Indifly. So my name is Matt Shilling. I'm the executive director of Indifly. And Indifly is a community-first nonprofit that gives Indigenous peoples an enterprise-based framework, really for the creation of sustainable livelihoods while focusing on protecting ecosystems. So that's a big mouthful, right? But what we really believe is that Indigenous communities have the power to solve the world's most pressing environmental challenges. We work alongside Indigenous communities to innovate ways for those communities to kind of write their own future. And we do that in a variety of ways. But at the end of the day, we serve Indigenous communities, right? And that's our whole role, is to serve these communities to help protect the remaining pristine places in the world. And so we, at the end of the day, really help Indigenous communities own and operate ecotourism destinations. We primarily use fly fishing as that tool when we talk about ecotourism. What results in that is the creation of sustainable livelihoods, but it also generates these community-wide economic benefits and an incentive for the protection of homelands. We currently have projects kind of all over the world: Africa, North America, South America, the South Pacific, and I'm going to probably address some questions here that you're likely to get from some listeners, which is, look, lots of global issues on the forefront today. Why focus on Indigenous communities? We get that a lot. And the simple answer is that these communities are vital. It's a bigger population than what most people think. If you look globally, it's, 476 million people. That's a big number. 6% of the global population, but 19% of the world's poorest. And they occupy a vast amount of land, about 22% of the Earth's land surface. So those are all important, but not as important as this next fact, which is, they're custodians of 80% of the world's remaining biodiversity. And people are kind of shocked by that number, but that's a UN number that's pretty reputable, and it's staggering. When you talk about who can add value to protecting the remaining biodiversity left, it's these Indigenous communities, and really everyone should be doing their part to help these communities protect those lands. Another question, and it's a little bit easier on a fly fishing podcast, but that we get asked a lot is, look, know you guys love to fly fish, but is it really a viable solution to these big global challenges? And the fact is that it's a proven model at this point. Here's a few reasons why fly fishing really works in these communities. The first, and probably the most important, is that it's typically familiar. A lot of the communities, and most of them that we serve, they already know how to fish, whether they do that for recreation or they do that to put food on their family's table. We just kind of expand that local knowledge and introduce a new tool, which is fly fishing, to drive tourism. Look, there's a lot of entertainment that comes from that. When you walk into a community and tell someone that you're going to teach people how to catch fish in the most inefficient way possible, oftentimes the hardest way possible, and that people are going to come down and contribute economically and in other ways to your village or tribe or community. And take a picture with said fish and let it go so somebody else can catch it, they kind of laugh you out of the room and think you're a bit crazy in the beginning. But once you get over that local entertainment, people come around to the idea of, hey, maybe this is a viable, sustainable way to protect what we have here. The other thing is, jumping into that word, which we'll probably use a lot today, is it's sustainable, right? All of our projects are rooted in science. Kind of the first phase of what we do in a project is to send in a science team and really understand how much pressure that fishery can sustain before we invite it outside people to come enjoy it as well. So conservation is a tenet of in everything that we do. And then the third one is, certainly not least, but it can be really lucrative. You guys are all fly anglers. I'm assuming they're listening to this podcast. You know that it can be expensive. It doesn't necessarily have to be expensive to get into this sport. But there's a large group of people who want to go fish places where people don't fish often, or maybe fish for the first time, and that all adds value to this model of creating livelihoods and protecting homelands. So I'm happy to go more and more into that, but I also want Jeremy to have a chance to talk too. So
yeah, no, that was great and covered a lot. One thing that before we do move on to Jeremy is encompassing all of what that means. And when I met you guys, Matt and Jeremy there in the Wind River Reservation, explain y'all's project a little, just a little bit, and we'll dive into it more later. But and kind of the idea of what y'all had going over there, and y'all's plan for the summit.
Yeah, Jeremy, you want me to go first, or you want to go?
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, so backing up, Indifly really started as an international organization. We started with this little village in South America called Rewa. And once we kind of had the model proven, we at this point it was just a group of individuals working through a sunglass company, Costa, to help this village that wanted to do conservation in a little different way than their peers, and they were willing to take that risk. And so while the world didn't need another nonprofit necessarily, no one was really doing what we were doing. So we got together and said, "Hey, let's stand this up. We think it's a scalable model around the world." And so, kind of all along, we wanted to do something domestically from the very beginning. And we were lucky enough to find the folks at Wind River, which is, I always describe, one of the last pristine places left in the lower 48. It is, an amazing ecosystem. So you're for those of people who don't know, and Jeremy can probably speak better to this, but you're 2.2 million acres. One of the most beautiful places in the U.S., in my opinion. You have thousands of miles of streams, couple hundred lakes. It's an ecosystem that's part of the Yellowstone ecosystem. So you're within that kind of same ecological footprint, but you're also, from a size standpoint, you're kind of the same footprint as Yellowstone National Park. And that has a multitude of visitors, hundreds of millions of visitors, and lots of economic resources. Wind River is not any less important ecologically. There's just not people going there and recreating. And, maybe the argument can be made there doesn't need to be people going there and recreating, and that's what makes it special. But, you have largely the biggest asset on the Wind River Reservation is that 2.2 million acres. You have different geographies in terms of, you have big rivers, you have small streams, you have backcountry, you have canyons, you have all these different things. And what you really have is an opportunity to make it a world-class eco-tourism destination in a multitude of ways. We're focused on fly fishing in the beginning. But, I'm going to let Jeremy talk about some of the challenges in the community, but the challenges are vast. And one of them, when we first went there, we kind of approach our introduction into communities totally different than most non-government organizations or nonprofits, right? You see a lot of nonprofits around the world, for better or worse, go and say, "Hey, here's a bunch of money. We're giving it to you. Here's what we think you should do with it," and kind of disappear. Our model is a little bit different in that everything that we do is 100% owned and operated by the communities themselves. And so that presents challenges, of course. but it's the only way that we feel the model works is if the local communities are in charge and it's a bottom up approach versus a top down approach. And so we found Wind River, and we just started kind of hanging out there for like 4 years before we ever talked about an organization or talked about fly fishing, or we go fly fishing and take people fly fishing, obviously. But we really just wanted to build relationships, and those relationships were needing to be based on a level of trust. That was super important to us. The level of skepticism in many places like this around the world is pretty high, rightfully so, and we didn't want to be those guys in our case. And so we took the time to really build those relationships, and along the way met some key players that really we thought could be crucial to doing an Indifly model on the Wind River Reservation. But one of the things that we noticed very early on was the lack of youth engagement in their backyard, if you will. You have, again, this amazing resource out the back door, but not a lot of kids, for many reasons, going out to enjoy it. And so when we talk about making these changes in communities, or communities making the changes themselves, we're talking about generational impacts. We're not talking about a 5-year program or 5-year funding or 1 year whatever, right? We're trying to make these generational changes, and that can take time, so we're willing to make that time invested. But more importantly is that we need to get kids involved in almost everything that we do, and those kids are key to a lot of what we do. And it's no different on the Wind River Reservation. But the focus really initially shifted from, all right, let's go in and let's start marketing this place as a destination through the community. Let's bring some resources to the tribes that they may not have access to. And eventually this all culminates in the building of a lodge that's community owned and operated. We really felt it necessary and important to kind of take a step back and a pause and say, all right, well, who are the future leaders here? It's these kids. Let's spark their interest in the outdoors so they then have a passion to protect it. And it's good business sense maybe, but it's more importantly really good, like, just for the resource. If you have a group of kids who now have access to the outdoors and they're excited about it and they're engaged and they're learning from it, much like you two guys, you're gonna probably do things like join a fly fishing club, or you're going to make it a passion project personally for yourself, right? And so that's kind of the whole model there. So I'm going to shut up now and let Jeremy talk. But one of the priorities for us all along, and we wanted to find the right person, and I'm confident that we found him, is we really wanted someone there locally on the ground who can focus their day-to-day efforts on youth engagement, because we felt that's really important. So Jeremy is pretty new to the role, but has hit the ground running and has made a huge impact so far. Yeah. So I'll turn it over to him to tell you kind of more about what's going on locally there.
Yeah, Jeremy, I would say definitely talk about your introductions, and then also what really meant for Matt and Indifly coming to the reservation. So yeah.
Thanks. Thanks, Joseph, and thanks for putting this on and having us on here. Matt, covered a lot there, and it's my name is Jeremy Molt. I'm the youth coordinator for tribal fish and game, and Indifly supports my role with tribal fish and game, and so I'm my role is I see it as really pivotal, I guess, with the youth and being able to get them involved. Like Matt said, there's a lot of challenges here at Wind River, and the youth that I'm engaging with on a day-to-day basis are somewhat limited in their ability to access their own backyard in terms of all the land that's available to them, and that it's not the truth. It's true for all of them, but it's true for a lot of them. Right. And so just through my own background, and realizing what fly fishing has done for me on a personal level. It can be very therapeutic. It can be very, just time on the outdoors, time in the outdoors, time on the water. That's kind of been my role, is like getting these kids and developing those personal relationships, like that on a first name basis. So like, it's a big picture thing, and it's kind of hard to get it was hard for me to get my head around it, and I'm really starting to see it now, where it's like I go to schools, and I'm meeting these kids, and they're we're laughing and having a good time, and I'm teaching them how to tie clinch knots, and how to cast, do basic casting, and you guys came up and kind of kicked it off for us at the summit. There were some really good things that came from that, and so that's kind of been my role, is engaging those kids, and bringing them out on the water whenever I can, and talking to them about fishing. But it's also an opportunity to like get them away from an environment that sometimes is not very healthy. They're not able to be outside. No one's taking them outside. And certainly, sometimes no one's taking them to fish. And so like that's, or even hunting. So we're trying to open the door for that, to with the youth and with the community members that want to be involved. So a lot of times I'm seeing my role as like just plug and play. Like there's a lot of resources. There's incredible people here on the reservation, that other mentors, and uncles, and different community leaders that want to be involved. And so my role has been really just like getting folks to work together, talk to one another, to share resources, to build that, build those relationships, and build trust. Um, One of the things that I guess I want to address is that, especially with recreation, outdoor recreation, a lot of times with people of color or minorities, or natives, or even Latinos, or however you want to say it. The perception is a lot of times that outdoor recreation is not for them. When they go into those spaces and they see the big RVs and the fancy gear and everything like that, they a lot of times don't feel welcome, and don't they feel like, if I go over there, maybe somebody's going to tell me I'm not supposed to be there. And as we're seeing a new generation, that a lot of the older generation pass, and some of these kids are losing their connection to even the outdoors here on the reservation. It's like that level of comfortability just in going and trying something new. And so that's where my role is. I think I come in there and just say like, here's a fly rod, here's a fishing pole, let's go to this part, let's go over here, let's check it out. You know what I mean? And so I'm trying to break that break that mental barrier of, this is something you can do. You don't have to feel uncomfortable going out here to do this. And what's really amazing is what comes from that is, when you get time on the water, you start to see kids asking like, well, why is the water lower now than it was before? You know, um, why is the water dirty right now? And what happens at this time of year? And what are these bugs? And all of a sudden you're into like ecology, and, well, what's happening with our river? What's happening? It's like, as soon as they catch a fish on this river, then they're concerned that, well, wait a second, what happened to the water here, or why is it this, like, then all of a sudden it just dovetails right into conservation.
Right.
um,
They make that
and
bond.
yeah, and there's a spiritual, mental connection, with an emotional connection with the land itself, with the water.
Absolutely.
And it just ties in so beautifully with the whole traditional aspect, the cultural aspect of
Right.
that, because that's what the elders are saying.
Yes.
That's what they're saying all along. Nature, the fish, the wildlife are sacred. All these things are sacred. Well, how does a kid that's on Facebook, or doesn't go outside, connect with that teaching? And that's really, what I'm finding is, even youth that are emotionally disturbed, that maybe they're having a hard time. I'm working with them. You could sit down and talk to them and try to teach them all kinds of things and tell them why they need to change their perspective, or tell them what would be a good idea. But for me, like taking them out on the water, and nothing has to be said. Half an hour, 45 minutes watching the water go by, and the sun and the fresh air, and you see this change. And that's what I'm after as a youth coordinator. That's what I'm after, is those interactions. And then there's the doorway that opens up to this whole other world of like reconsidering their perspective on life. And so it's a really incredible thing. I'm really grateful to have this role. I love it. I go to work every day, like, I can't believe I have this job. So but like, I wanted to say, like, even tell you guys, like, even from the fly fishing class that we had, I had kids that came back to my next one that learned to cast at that
Stream.
event, and were doing amazing. Like, they were rocking it. Like, they had
awesome.
done nothing but, I had like a handful of kids that did nothing but practice fly fishing since that event, because they had caught fish, and it had connected with them. And then we brought the wildlife biologists up, and they're like talking to one individual, one kid in particular. He's like, yeah, he's sitting there just like blasting out like 20-yard casts, like links up with this little this brookie, and he's like, yeah, I'm thinking about becoming a field wildlife biologist.
There you go. That's something I meant to ask, is like, since we left, and since you started your position, what's the feedback been, and has it been looking good? But yeah, it sounds like
clearly those kids were not in my group.
Yeah, some of these kids are just amazing. They're just amazing individuals, and if someone gives them half a chance, you just crack the door, they're gonna blast it wide open. Right. And it's just, so that's the amazing part about it. I just they blow me away, these kids. But as far as the community goes too, it's like, there's so many things. Native people, we can be very divided. We're very we can be very insular for a lot, and for good reason. But when it comes to the youth, that's something that everybody just automatically gets behind, and so yeah, that's it's been a really positive response from the community.
Yeah, Jeremy brought up a few things I want to touch on, which are really important. One is this idea of the importance of culture in everything that we do, right? So at Indifly, we always talk about these pillars of sustainability that we stand on. A couple of them we've already talked about, right? Environmental, everything rooted in science. Economic, how do you create an opportunity for people to come down and do what they love to do and make a big, vast impact in a community? And I'll touch a little bit more on that in a second. But what I really want to touch on is this idea of the cultural pillar. And, one of the things that people love to do is, they love to go to new places and immerse themselves in a new culture. And so the people who come to our projects, typically when they're telling their story to their family at the table or their buddies at the bar, the trip isn't told in a sense of, hey, I went to this place, I caught this many fish, they were this big, look at all these pictures. It's I met Jeremy, or I met X from the reservation, or whatever project it is, and this is what I learned about their life, and this is how it changed my perspective. And a lot of these people who go on these trips, they go all over the world, right? And so it's less about the fish and more about the importance of perspective to them. And then they change that and they adapt it into their daily life, whether it's their coworkers or their family or their kids. They share those lessons, and that's super important. And so when you talk about Wind River specifically, we presented this plan to the councils, and a lot of that plan talked about how can we present opportunities for elders of the community to help make the culture cool. And I don't want to use the term relevant because it'll always be relevant. Right. But how do you get kids interested in learning the language and telling stories that have been passed down for generations and all these things? And if we can do that successfully in a way that also promotes like healthy opportunities for kids to stay away from addiction to negative things, like you can be addicted to fly fishing, you can be addicted to the outdoors, you can be addicted to almost anything. Let's create those healthy addictions. And if we can incorporate culture, and it's not us, right, incorporating culture, it's the elders incorporating the culture, that's a win for everyone, because one, it provides potential job opportunities for people in the future, but also it's really good business sense because people want to immerse in that culture.
Right. That's awesome. So with that being said, what are some of the future positions that will be presented with Wind River tribal fishing?
Yeah, I'll take the first shot at that. Again, almost everything we do culminates in this, community owned and operated ecotourism lodge, right? And that lodge is hard in some aspects and easy in others. So break it down to ownership and operations. Ownership is super easy; it's legal paperwork, right? Mm-hmm. Operations is most important, and it is for all the reasons I just talked about. And it's a little bit more challenging. So if you take Wind River, for example, there's not necessarily a pipeline of native guides who can go and take you to float on a river or to take you in the backcountry or whatever. Mm-hmm. So it's a big priority for us to increase that pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. And that comes in the form of a guide school or tying classes. One of the misconceptions, and there are many, including the cost to fly fishing, is that you have to be a guide, and that's kind of the only job to work in if you're talking about quote unquote fly fishing lodge. That's just not the case, right? What we're doing is creating this hub and spoke model. That hub being the lodge itself, but all these little spokes come off of it, and they're all little smaller scale entrepreneurial activities, or maybe they're lodge employees themselves. But think about somebody who really likes marketing, right? That's applicable. Somebody who wants to be a chef, learn how to cook and serve people. That's applicable. Somebody who wants to be a groundskeeper. Somebody who wants to start a shuttle company. Somebody who wants to make rods. Rod building. Somebody who makes arts and crafts, beadwork, whatever, and sells it to the people staying at the lodge. You can go infinite amounts of those places, but the workforce development aspect of this is something that we're focusing on Wind River, and here's where it kind of stands now. Wind River is somewhat unique amongst native communities in that their conservation ethic is super strong. You're talking like a wilderness area decades before the Wilderness Act was enacted in Congress, right? You're talking about tribes that adopted a game code when most tribes did not have a game code, right? And so what that game code outlines is who can hold an outfitting permit. In order to do so, you have to be an enrolled member of the tribe. It doesn't really address who can work for those outfitters, right? And so, in some cases, in native communities, you go and you're supporting a business that's native owned, but the person in the boat is a white person, or somebody not from the community. Mm-hmm. And so, how do we create all these opportunities for the dollars that are spent by visitors to Wind River to stay on Wind River and impact enrolled members of Wind River? We talked about workforce development, but you can also talk about economic leakage elsewhere. Like you go to Wind River, and Joseph, you guys are a great example. Outside of camping, you guys stayed outside of Lander, right? So we met for dinner one night at a restaurant in Lander. Mm-hmm. So there's all these opportunities to create good businesses that impact the reservation itself, and all those dollars stay on the reservation. Now, there's much smarter people than I am that are studying the best way to do that, right? We have some economists on the team that are working on that, but that's really the goal, is to create this workforce development plan and start this pathway of hope almost for these kids who, from first introduction to Jeremy to Jeremy and others talking about, hey, have you ever thought about a career in the outdoors? Because we have 2.2 million acres in our backyard that really need some help.
Right.
That could be cutting trails. That could be fisheries or wildlife biology, as Jeremy mentioned. That could be being a guide. That could be, there's numerous ways to do that. But that workforce development thing is something we're really focused on. We had a pretty good push before COVID, and then the world shut down, and that happened. And that's certainly not an excuse, but it's just kind of ramping back up again. And Jeremy's a key part of that, because he's able to meet with people and groups and really identify who those people are that want to explore this, and then we can create the vehicles to explore, if you will.
Now, Jeremy, in turn, I would like to ask, we heard, I guess, Matt's future plan and what they kind of have an idea of sorting out on the reservation. Now, I guess, what are your future plans in your position to almost go along with that, and working together to achieve that main goal?
Well, I mean, I've kind of envisioned myself to be like, my priority is to find my replacement. Like to find that kid
Right.
that sees me doing what I do and going like, I want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Because honestly, that was my inspiration. With meeting Art here, the director at Tribal Fish and Game, and Matt and Johan at Indifly. Like, these guys have these great jobs where they're outside and they're enjoying life and they're doing cool things with cool people, and it's awesome. And I want to do that,
Mm-hmm.
and bringing that to the community and letting young people see that, and it's working, it's happening. Like they are getting that, and so that's my kind of primary objective, I think, is just to inspire that excitement about the possibilities of what's out there. And I'm doing some of that. What's really cool about it is I get to engage with the community, and I'm not bringing an agenda to the community saying this is what we're telling you to do. And I've kind of followed Matt's lead in that regard, but I've also learned that from my own time in the community that that it's not really cool like to show up in a community and be like, this is how we're going to help you. It's more like, what kind of help do you need, and what do you guys think? And I'm meeting elders, and that have a lot to say about the water and about the things that they would like to see done and how they would like the youth to be engaged. So I think at this point, like, I'm kind of firing on all cylinders in terms of really keeping my ears open to what the community members are telling me they want to see, and trying to respond to that in a way that is helpful. That I'm my goal is to promote. Like, I'll give you an example. I have a community member that works with the buffalo, and they're planning on doing a harvest for one of the buffalo, and it's going to be filmed, and I'm just like, well, it would be really cool if we got one of the youth that took our hunter safety course here recently to take that shot.
Yeah.
Like, and I can't make that happen, but I can suggest it, and I can try to coordinate it, and I can try to be, encourage those connections to happen. I'm not in charge of anything in that regard, but I can make those connections and try to inspire those things to happen. And so yeah, that's kind of how I'm engaging. It's it's a lot of listening, a lot of patience, and a lot of coordinating.
Right. And then, like, it even goes for us still in college, seeing someone your age do something, another kid in assistance, shooting that animal. I mean, another kid seeing that is even more encouraging than somebody a little bit older, per se.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I think that goes a long way in both in y'all's mission, y'all's ultimate goal. of hopefully establishing something there. Now, Matt, I kind of wanted to turn back to you because I missed this question earlier, but what kind of examples do you have where this plan has worked out? Maybe here, overseas. I know y'all do a lot of stuff overseas, but what does that kind of look like? Not on the Wind River Reservation, but somewhere else, for example.
Yeah, great question. First, though, I want to talk about the importance of listening,
Right.
which Jeremy's very very smart to bring up. Look, the whole Indifly model doesn't work without local leadership, and so if one day, for instance, hypothetically, Art and/or others came and said, "Look, we just aren't interested anymore." Our model is not going to work there because it's 100% owned by the community, right? And so, I just wanted to touch on the importance of that. We don't have all the answers, and we aren't the experts. The communities that we serve are the experts, and so anything that we can do to learn from them is a priority for us. And I think that's something that makes us different. And so I just wanted to say, Jeremy, that I'm really happy to hear you say that. Yeah. So look, I can give a couple examples, but we'll have you here for hours. So let's talk about kind of the longest running program. So Rewa Eco Lodge, country called Guyana. You have a multitude of indigenous communities that kind of fled inland. So you're in the interior, in the Amazon basin. You have a group of, let's call it 294 at the moment, somewhere around there, villagers. And they had kind of over the past, decade, see the world around them kind of disappear, if you will. They were getting a tremendous amount of pressure from people exploiting their natural resources. I mean, again, you're talking about the middle of the rainforest. You're talking about, so timber's obviously an issue is where I'm going. But you also have gold and bauxite and diamond in abundance. And, luckily and almost uniquely, a lot of these communities are protected. They have what's called an Amerindian Act there. And so, but where I'm going with this is you have, a real world example of, the first time I went down to help, I was very naive and still am in a lot of cases, but I expected to be hundreds of miles in the rainforest. I'm loincloths and spears, right, man? I mean, like, this is what I'm getting into. What I got was Ed Hardy t-shirts, and the reason why is because during the dry season, all these mining camps, often foreign, drive through and they create barters for access to timber rights or gold rights or whatever, because through the Amerindian Act, they control that. And so you had a bunch of poaching going on, like, the areas was once an abundant place for the golden parakeet, which has now been poached to extinction for the pet trade. And you had this village, is where I'm going, that really wanted to do things different. And they didn't want to be exploitive, but they had shifted from the barter economy a long time ago, right? Mm-hmm. Men and women of the village needed to make an income. And so what they have down there is this very special fish called the Arapahoe, which is a prehistoric air-breathing, dinosaur, really, if you will. And for a lot of people, it's the biggest fish a fly angler will ever catch, right? You're talking, 200 to 300 pound animal. It's a super cool experience. So the rainy season to dry season fluctuation is about 40 feet. So what happens is during the rainy season, the jungle floods, the river floods into the jungle, if you will. And then during the dry season, drops 40 feet. And then these fish get caught in these ponds, and that's where you target them. Mm-hmm. And so it's a really cool experience. You're walking through the jungle, and lots of stories there. But you're very quietly in this boat because the fish are predators themselves, so they're really attuned to their environment, and you're casting basically sight casting like you would, they roll, if you will, to gulp air, and you're basically trying to time the gulps. And you have this amazing experience where they're vacuum feeders. So what they're doing is they're swimming up behind the fly and they're sucking it in, and then it becomes a challenge of setting the hook. And there's a scientific term for it, and the science team is probably not going to like that. I'm calling it something else, but basically it's like diamond plate in their jaw, right?
Right.
And so you're setting as hard as you can, and you aren't trout setting here. You're pulling and stripping as hard as you can over and over and over. And if you think you have them set, you don't. And what happens is, they eventually like start swimming towards the boat, and then when they turn away is usually when you can set them up. But then they're jumping like a tarpon, and then we I'm jumping all around here, but once the fish is landed, somebody gets in the water, and we have a local science protocol to where they tag every fish, and they get girth and length measurements, and we track every fish. In the beginning, we did like accelerometer studies, so we could figure out how long the fight, or the length of the fight in correlation to survival rates. We're at a very, very low mortality rate. Anyway, my point is it's good for the fish. And you have, again, like 294 people, let's call it, and that operation is able to employ, I think at the highest we're almost 80 people, right? Wow. Little bit different destination. But when you look at the correlation between population, you got a lot of kids in there too. Mm-hmm. So you're employing most of the adult population. And that is a total change in their day-to-day life. No longer are the men going to work very laboriously in a gold mine and basically breaking even by the time you go and pay for travel and food. No longer are the kids, missing members of their family for months at a time. Everyone's kind of stayed in the village. What's unique about that operation is that you can get creative with jobs. It's not a fun job. To be honest, it sucks, but somebody's got to pull boats through the jungle, right? The science team came up with this really innovative program for local data collection. So there's a local science team that is employed that creates defensible data or metrics that we can publish papers against. Obviously there's a culinary side and all of it, but the point is, you're looking at, village where the entire annual income for everyone in the village, it's a communal model, so they all kind of share. Less than $1,000 a year before this program. And now over the course of, call it 8 weeks, so 2 dry seasons, 4 weeks each, if you will, they'll do well into the 6 figures. And, what that results in is this change in quality of life. Some of it's good. Most of it's good. Some of it can be argued that it's not good. And I'll give you a couple of examples. But what those funds has allowed them to do is reinvest in themselves, right? They build schools, they hire teachers, they get clean water supplies, they, do all these things that is amazing. And not only that, but now they are local leaders, and, they can teach other villages to do the same thing. And really that's the model domestically here in North America is let's figure this out on Wind River, and let's have the Wind River community teach other Native communities, hey, here's a possibility, right? So that's one example. Some of those, you can't really say, oh, this is bad categorically. But, for instance, when we first showed up, the only form of communication was a shortwave radio, and that village reached the next village, which reached the next village, eventually got to the capital of Georgetown, like in an emergency, right? Now, Rovin, the guy who runs the Eco Lodge, carries around a cell phone. That phone can't call anybody, but he has satellite internet and can connect with clients. What's really cool to see there is, there's many challenges in the beginning. Some were easy to overcome, others were a bit more difficult. But when you think about a business, like you got to have a bank account, right? They had a bank account, but that bank account could only receive, I forget what the actual number is, but let's call it $5,000 in deposits a month, right? Well, it's $7,600 a rod to go for a week, right? And so, how do you get the money? And it's a 2-day boat ride away, the bank, right? So, how do you get the money logistically from the United States or Europe or wherever the guests are coming from to the village? That's a challenge. And so it's not all easy, but it's worth it. But what you're seeing now is this kind of culmination of the Indifly model there, if you will, which is our goal. Our goal is to get these communities self-reliant 100% and have us pull out. And REWA's by far the closest to that at the moment. But they're basically running trips from A to Z: initial customer, client, guest contact, answering questions, booking trips, booking charter flights, all those, provisioning for food, fuel, all those things, and then getting them out safely. There is the biggest thing, right? And it's a really cool thing to see that local leadership.
Yeah, that's amazing.
That's one of the things that's really been inspiring about for me working with Indifly, and being a part of this whole thing. Is just the true lack of ulterior motive, like a true altruistic, like we want to do something good in the world, and trying to find a way to do that for these communities, and for this community here. Like, one of the elders pulled me aside one time and told me that she thought that a lot of their problems started, that the more recent problems they have, just with the morale in the community, really began with outside entities coming in and just giving handouts to the community that really caused a lack of motivation for as successively generations went on. And so seeing that, Indifly has this different model that is really like, first let's inspire this desire to be a part of it, and then all of this comes through, like, self-reliance, right. And really what comes to that is dignity. That's a huge thing for a community to regain its dignity and its self-determination. We talk about it, you hear those words a lot, but something that that really makes that an avenue towards that. And it's hard for communities to see it. It takes time, it takes trust building, it takes relationships, and it takes determination, time.
Yeah. So, in a place being so remote, like for instance, sake, the Wind River Reservation, we all know that fishery is amazing, abundance of trout. How do y'all think, negatively or positively, that affects the fishery, whether it be fisheries management, conservation, or just the future for different species in that general area?
In terms of the, like, taking fish out of the system, you mean, or fishing, or
maybe? And I guess let me reiterate that. I guess since in the sense that, I guess, for Matt's instance, talk about the Arapahoe and Rewa and all of that, in that area in Guyana. Was that something that was in their backyard? Maybe they didn't fish a lot at the time. Maybe a lot of the people didn't know as much about the fishery. How has that maybe boosted their knowledge of the fishery, and either positively affected it or negatively affected it in y'all's perspective, in y'all's opinion?
Yeah, so I'll apply it to Rewa, and then I'll apply it to Wind River.
Right.
In Rewa's instance, I mean, look, Arapahoe was almost fished to extinction, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you're talking about a massive fish that feeds a lot of people, right? And so gill nets at the river was not uncommon, right? Mm-hmm. People can sell those. I mean, there's a market for the scales, which are really unique. And so it's actually a protected species now there. That happened before we came down, but you have to get permission to do it. There's a couple things there. One, I don't think that ourselves or the community really understood how important that fish would become. Here's a real world example. This was right before COVID. Let's call it 2018, 2019. You had this series of a 3-year drought. So, the jungle wasn't flooding anymore, basically, right? And so what happens is, that water all recedes internally in those ponds too. And then those fish are susceptible to predation themselves. I mean, like, you guys got to go down. It's like walking into a Disney movie. At the same time, everything there wants to kill you. So you have a lot of predation in the jungle. In the case of these Arapaima drying up in these ponds, you have jaguars, eagles, and all these things. And without kind of the first time that I was really blown away. Not for the first time, but I will always remember the story. Was Rovan was saying, "Yeah, we just got back from the jungle. We took these boats, and when they say boats, these are like hand carved canoes that weigh hundreds of pounds, and they filled them with water from the river and drug them through the jungle, put the fish in the canoe and drug it back out so this fish would survive." Right? It's just this whole flip of a mindset of, oh, that fish is now our livelihood, right?
Yeah.
So where I think it gets negative is pressure. One of the very delicate balances that we need to always be aware of on Wind River is it's a pristine ecosystem in many cases. There are a few areas. I mean, like the canyon you saw, Joseph. It runs by a highway. Probably the best trout fishery in the Western United States. Not unknown anymore. Easily accessible.
Right.
But the majority of the reservation is largely untouched. And so, how do we create this balance of solving the high 70 to 80% unemployment rate while providing sustainable access to the resource? Right.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that we're constantly aware of, and it's always an internal challenge, because if you go the wrong way, it gets bad really quick, right?
Right.
At the same time, when you talk about protection and enforcement of those resources, that's all funded by your fishing license or trespass permit, right? So whether you're hiking the Wind River Range, not carrying a rod, or you're stopping at the canyon to fish, you have to have a fishing license. Does that make sense? What you're really buying is a trespass permit. That permit funds a large part of arts programs. So in theory, just like this is the North American model of conservation, which I'm sure you guys, if you're not aware, will learn at some point, and I hope you do. Which is, license sales, hunting, fishing, coupled with excise taxes, right? Gear that's taxed, that was self-imposed, that sportmen and women fought for. That's how conservation is funded in North America. Is that money goes to the states manage the resource, and it all thrives, right? So with this increase and decrease of people participating in the sports, that can be a good or bad thing. Too much pressure, the resource declines. Too little pressure, it's unfunded. Too much pressure, or more pressure, I guess, results in bigger check for those things, right? More funds for those things. But at the same time, that may not remain sustainable over years. Mm-hmm. And so it's this constant balance on Wind River of, look, what makes this place special is the pristine nature of it. Right. And so is that a price point? Is that an ethic? Is that, how do we create these programs to attract the right people mm-hmm. that will come there that are like-minded, that also want to keep it pristine? Yeah. Does that make sense? That was a very long-winded answer to your question.
Right. No, and it's a long question to answer, and then you said it best. Finding that balance, which I think that's you said it best. I think it's it's fluctuating, and it's something that you got to always deal with internally. So, but no, that was a great answer. Thank you, Matt. We don't have much longer here with you guys, but it's been great talking with you guys. One thing about I wanted to talk to you guys about closing is that taken away from the Five Rivers Summit, and what I took away is all of what you guys described about today is the culture, meeting new people and just surrounding yourself in that moment. I believe looking back at the summit, like the first thing I think about is not the fishing, it's meeting everyone who came from, different schools. It was meeting you, Jeremy. It was meeting Matt. And it was bonding and sharing all of those special moments in that place. And I think with, both of y'all on board and the goals y'all have, it's only going to be like that for a long time now. I'm excited to see what hopefully y'all develop together, and Matt, all the projects you're working on. So yeah, I thank you guys for coming on today, and yeah, I appreciate it. It was awesome.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great. I mean, I'll start talking again, and Jeremy can close it out. But I mean, I think I don't want to speak for Jeremy, but we've talked about this, and really every person that was on that trip has the same sentiment, which is we all walked away super inspired by you guys. I mean, you constantly hear about, the people in college not being passionate or not, doing whatever. And man, you guys came and were a force. And it was really inspiring to myself, and I think everyone else included, of, man, like these kids are going to set the world on fire. And, it was really, really cool to see. And just, like your willingness, and just from a personal standpoint, I want to say thank you too. This was my 10-year-old's kind of first trip out to the West, if you will, and that was the only part of the trip I was a little bit worried about. Is all right, how is he going to hang with older kids? And you guys just like took them under your wing and were super cool. So thank you for that. But also, man, like, the Five Rivers program is super cool, and I know it's a challenge, and I think that your club is one of the newer clubs. But man, like, keep up the good fight, and if there's anything that we can do, personally or through the organization to help, don't hesitate to reach out, man, because it's really important what y'all are doing.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a blast. Some of the relationships and the connections that I made at that summit, are still playing out. We're going to be meeting with Trout Unlimited here on Thursday with fish biologists from Fish and Wildlife Service to start planning what rivers and streams do we want to study. Do we want to do a trout adopt a trout program with the schools, and start tracking fish where we track where they go and what they're doing. So we're, a lot of things are still kind of playing out even from those connections that were made there. And like I just would like to back up what Matt said about just your guys' passion. You guys, I didn't realize you guys paid your own way out here, came out, we cleaned up trash, we taught kids how to fish. Like I basically just took that model and replicated it, on the biggest scale that I could. And so when I take kids out to fish, we stop, we have a little conversation, we pick up some trash, and they're like, okay. And I'm like, it looks better, huh? They're like, yeah, it does. Totally. And it's just, that inspiration, and all the community members are really thankful, like how one-on-one, how you guys were with the youth. They all had a great time. I'll just going to say this though, I've never seen like some of those. We spent that time fishing in the canyon, and some of those rocks are like, and I used to like slowly climb down. I'm always afraid. And we were doing some sight fishing, and one of the guys hooked up with a fish. I have never seen anyone fly down the face of one of the canyon cliffs so fast to get that fish. And I think that was you and Connor and Vance.
Yeah, it's. I mean, just to witness everyone almost break their like PB trout is it's amazing. It's something you really can't describe, and for me to take that all in, and with you guys, like I said, it's really still something I can't describe until, like you said, Jeremy, we were talking there. I distinctly remember, looking off into the sunset and talk about like how you can't describe this unless you're there at that point in time. You just really can't. It's indescribable unless you're in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
All right, Brian. Now you got to come out, man.
Oh, 100%.
Let's do a Texas A&M club trip.
Oh man, we'd love to. We always talk about planning trips. We just have no rain around here, so that we're going through some pretty big droughts around here in Texas. All our creeks and lakes and whatever we have are low right now. And we've gone out fishing around this area. He's been lucky with some catfish. We're trying to get on some bass and some crappie, but this weather is just not on our favor.
Yeah.
Well, come to Wyoming, and there's lots of water and rain there, so you'll be all right.
Well, just a couple of days ago, landed a 26-inch. I'm just a guess, like 20, rainbow, using the same backward, technique, letting it come up the back way that you guys taught me. You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
Where are these guys? They're hitting hoppers with thumbs right now, so yeah, you're missing out.
Oh man, you're teasing us, man. Jeez, we'll be back up there for sure. But yeah, no, we'll definitely keep in contact with you guys. We have a lot of cool stuff planned with the club, and that's our model too. We just want to grow, get other people into fly fishing, and be that community outreach. What can we do to pick up trash? What can we do to just encourage others? So
100%. Yeah.
Thank you guys. We appreciate it. We'll keep in touch, and like I said, thank you guys for coming on last minute and talking with us. So it was amazing.
Yeah, it's nice
thanks, fellas. Enjoyed it.
Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thank you.
Awesome.
All right.
Bye, y'all.
All right.